Oh, the fun has begun already. This is the Public Square. If only we started the recorder just a bit early here today, but we didn't, and it's lost forever. Welcome to the Public Square. I'm Wayne Shepherd with Dave Zanotti, Jeff Sanders. Sherry Eisen is here today, Rob Walgate, and our executive producer, Alan C. Duncan. And this is going to be a catch-all program, huh, Dave?
Yeah, Wayne, that's one way of saying it, and we call it popcorn.
There you go. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of a way of letting our dear and beloved listeners go on a vacation with us, but still stay listening on the radio. We sort of say we've got 5 or 6 subjects that we've been batting around here with such intensity, none of which really make up the time frame of an entire broadcast, all of which we really would like to talk about. Sure. And so this is one of those things where you just can't turn away or look away because it's going to keep coming at you all day. So it's popcorn session. And I want to start with a reflection on last week's broadcast.
Okay.
And the event at that the Bradley Foundation hosted in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Allen's comments, the speech. And in case anyone missed that broadcast, I would like to really encourage people to go back and listen. Because that particular program now has become the basis for our monthly update for the month of June. Yeah, and we go a little bit more into depth into what Dr. Allen's thinking is. And it believe it or not, it's having an impact on this presidential election. There's a conversation that's beginning to develop, and we're going to get into it in just a few minutes here today, where people are starting to talk about stuff that really matters regarding this federal election. And that election includes both the presidency and the Senate and the House, and then all of the state races. There's actually an import of substance. There's smoke signals out there in the hills that somebody or some groups of somebodies are actually saying, this election is not about personalities or parties. This election is reflective of a much deeper conversation about what is our country supposed to look like going forward, and what are we doing to ourselves? What are we thinking? I see a glimmer of hope, a moment where there's a chance to have a bigger, deeper, more serious conversation, and to put this into context. We want to capitalize on that. Now, a good way to do that is to go back and to listen to what Dr. Allen had to say in last week's broadcast, and then take just 4 minutes. It only takes 4 minutes to read our monthly update. We write them for a 4-minute read. And so we stay on one subject. And in that one subject, we amplify Dr. Allen's thoughts into how he is interpreting what's going on in our country right now at a much deeper, historic, and I would submit far more honest level about how are we going to govern ourselves going forward, and how badly are we missing the mark right now in our debates in Congress and our States of the Union addresses, of all this stuff. And is this a civil war that's coming, or is it really a revolution? And is the revolution that's coming actually a revolution that is top down, where there are forces and people and individuals and organizations that are in control of pockets of power inside the federal system of government, where they are mobilizing their agenda against the wishes of the people. And they're doing it by changing the practice of government outside of constitutional boundaries. And they're getting away with it because people don't remember what the constitutional boundaries are.
That sounds scary.
Yeah. So, there's a big movie that was been out. People have been talking about it. Jeff, did you see the film Civil War?
Did not see the film. Saw a few clips, though.
Yeah. I'm waiting on the clips. I'm waiting for the drop from $19.99 to $4.99 on download like everybody else.
I do have friends who have seen it and who are in law enforcement and say that the gunfighting scenes were quite authentic.
Okay. The idea is that what happens if there is an American Civil War? I don't know if the film has merit or not, but there was a feature film that got to the theaters on the subject. And so you hear about it all the time, this idea. But Dr. Allen has made it very clear, we're missing the mark there. This is not a civil war. This is a movement to, and again, I use the word out loud on the radio, one of the banned words here on the public square. There is a movement inside the federal structure to basically move the power of the government against resisting forces of the people. So when you hear things like the weaponization of the Department of Justice, that it's mobilized to actually target people. And this goes way before Donald Trump. The weaponization of the Department of Justice has been going on in regards to the pro-life community for a long time. We could go the whole way back to Joe Scheidler and to Randy Alcorn. We could go back 30 years.
True.
Where the Justice Department was being mobilized against the pro-life community.
Weren't those RICO charges
yes.
at that
yes.
time?
Yes.
That's the part that still leaves me scratching my head on how that came about when you go after pro-life individuals in that
because
manner.
They were being successful and people stopped going to Planned Parenthood for abortion, so Planned Parenthood wanted to litigate because they were working to shut down their business. So they were the pro-lifers were racketeers. And they got convicted. The pro-lifers got convicted on this stuff.
But weren't the RICO charges later thrown out,
yes,
though?
But only after years of suffering and years of financial loss.
But we have seen that from the government side many times. The charges come about, and then you're stuck defending yourself.
Yeah.
You're
totally innocent. But
I mean,
so
look at COVID and everything that happened. Those decisions come down to press charges, to go after someone.
Where's the bailout bag here? You had to say that word.
To go after a business, to go after an individual. And when they know what they're trying to enforce is not constitutional, but they don't care because they'll just go after it.
Well, COVID is an excellent example. And one of the shows that we were thinking about doing, and we still may do, and I want the title to be Zero to Insanity in 100 Days. Because I had to go back on a project and begin to redevelop, review the timeline of COVID. And it was staggering to me. So I started asking people, so when did COVID start? Almost everybody. So, when did COVID start? What year was COVID actually starting? Almost everybody I talked to said 2019. Okay, so just going back in their mind, and that was good because they were really close, but it wasn't 2019, it was 2020.
That's when it hit, and they started shutting everything down in March.
We went from zero in January, from zero to shutting down the country in 100 days. We went from zero to insanity in 100 days. States were shutting down everything when there were less than 100 cases reported.
It was at the end of January. It was making its rounds in Asia, and it was starting to be a big deal. And I was in Phoenix, and I was flying home, and there were more masked people, like when I say more masked people, like 5-8 people on a plane had masks on. I'd never seen that in my life. I'm like, what is going on here? Like looking around, and we didn't really know that it was what it was at the time, but that was the paranoia that was starting to set in.
That 100 days completely collapsed the presidential administration. The election was 2020 in November. 0 to November, completely transformed. Within less than 4 months, the governor of Ohio, Mike DeWine, by fiat, by his own words, literally demanded as a dictator that the election, the primary election, including federal offices, was immediately suspended because he said so.
And I believe that was March 17th, 2020, and he went to the court the day before to try and get it done, and the judge was like, I'm not touching this.
The judge threw the governor out saying, you got to be kidding me. I'm not going to touch this absurdity.
A former attorney general of Ohio, a lawyer.
A United States senator.
Trying to pull this off.
And did.
And he was successful.
We went from zero to insane in about 100 days. Now, if you think about this, it didn't start there. You remember, oh boy, there's so many. I'm getting so many scabs ripped off right now, and scars. I may need a 911 call before we get to segment 2. You remember standing outside in the freezing rain. Jeff Sanders, you were there when Barack Obama came to Ohio.
I know what you're talking about.
Right before the final vote on Obamacare, and we went to that crowd and we distributed color brochures that basically said, a president or a king, on the dictates of Obamacare. And we did program after program after program explaining to people we're all missing the boat. What Obamacare is not about health care reform. And it's not about taking care of 42 million or whatever the fanciful number that was totally fraudulent who are uninsured in America. It's about creating a piece of legislation so massive that it will pick up the authority. Get this now. The key word is authority. authority. It will pick up the legal authority over who shall decide how you get your health care and move it from your doctor, your hospital, your insurance program, your state insurance controlling agencies, your legislature, and drop it not in the hands of Congress. No, Congress has actually got the steam shovel. They're picking it up and they're dropping it in the Department of Health and Human Services. And they're giving the director of the Secretary of HHS all this incredible authority that someday they will utilize. Guess when someday showed up? 2020 and COVID.
More of the top-down revolution.
Exactly. We had been so conditioned that all the decisions come out of Washington, D.C., that when Washington, D.C., both parties decided, here's an idea, let's shut down the country. Don't worry, we'll shut it down and we'll send you a check.
And when
people said, thanks.
And when you ask a question and bring up, scientific evidence that is contrary to what you're being told by the people in charge, I use air quotes, you are told that that is disinformation and you are killing people. And how dare you question the people who know better?
We're wounding millions of people right now.
And you put on a mask and so you will like it, even though there's plenty of evidence now.
Okay. Now.
That it doesn't work.
Now, hang on, the popcorn actually comes out in just a minute. It gets a little better.
That's just the first kernel, so stay with us on the Public Square. We will be back, and we are online too. You can always use that website to listen, thepublicsquare.com.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
Things are popping here today on the Public Square. Glad you could be with us. And I hope you're sharing this program with others. An easy way to do that is using that website or the smartphone app that people don't really know too much about. It's there. It's free. Make use of it. You can listen to the program, download them, and take them with you wherever you go. Okay. Back to the conversation now with the team, Dave.
Rob, your turn.
Well, it just seems as if the government makes decisions in haste and they don't think about the consequences. And we'll go back to the COVID thing. You know, you talk about so many places when it comes to hospitals, schools, other government agencies were mandating that their employees get the vaccine. And those that didn't, they fired.
Yeah.
They got rid of.
Yeah.
But then come 2023, they were doing everything they could to hire those people back.
And you know what?
They didn't get the vaccine. And we're like, wait a minute here. You just destroyed 3 years of their lives because you wanted to have total control and dictate how they would live their lives. But then you realized, you know what we asked them to do maybe didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So now will you come back? How does that make sense?
Well, and they also believed themselves to be the experts and the elite, and they gave no credit to the people to be able to think and reason for themselves.
So here we are as a public policy organization and what we believe to be a missionary organization, if you will, to America. Now, that may sound a little pompous to some people, and if it does, I apologize. But we're trying to figure out, doesn't there need to be an association of people who agree that what we should try to do is the right thing the right way again? Because clearly, this does not work. And we are under siege during the whole COVID situation. We've got one doc who is beyond being assailed, Dr. Charles McGowan, medical professor, Air Force flight surgeon, career in practice in his 80s, who has taught more about virology and happens, just so happens, to have been in his office in a clinic that focuses on people that are receiving their health care through Medicaid services. And the first case in the northern quadrant of Ohio shows up of COVID in his office. And he's one of the first doctors facing the mandatory quarantine. And so while he was at home for 2 weeks and 14 days, we went into a daily briefing that we began to share with people everywhere on COVID. And that kept going for 2 solid years. The point is, We went, if you go back on the timelines and you look at the timelines, they're unbelievable. It seemed like it was forever. We're talking about 100 days. The country went mad. In 9 months, an election was completely upended. Things happened historically that have never happened before based on these decisions that were being made. We created trillions of dollars of completely unnecessary debt, which led to completely tragic fraud. And we're now all paying that bill. Yeah. And Dr. Fauci goes before Congress, and somehow, I don't exactly know, other than his personal defiance and animus to members of Congress, it seemed like all of that circus that went on just a few days ago comes back to, yeah, we were wrong. We were wrong. We were wrong about a lot of that stuff.
Oops.
Yeah, we were wrong.
And we still get mail from people whose lives are adversely still affected by all of that.
Well, we've got an interview that needs to happen with Dr. Aaron Cariotti, who's a friend of ours here, who is one of the lead agents with Jay Bhattacharya, who we talked about last week, another Bradley Prize Award winner, Dr. Bhattacharya. They're still in the Supreme Court fighting about their rights being stripped from them because the revolution from the top coming down silenced doctors, and these doctors got fired.
And I think people would take, oops, we were wrong, I apologize. Well, I don't even think they're saying I apologize, but we'd take, oops, we were wrong better if they had just been making suggestions all along. But you get into a problem when you were making dictates and mandates.
And those dominoes all fell, didn't they?
Yeah. It's okay to make a suggestion, but you expected us all to actually do it at the gunpoint.
Think about the madness in the healthcare system. We're already in a population crisis. We do not have a replacement vet level here. Well, we've got less kids. We've got less people in medical school. We've got less nurses. It's already a dangerous environment in 2019. In 2020, they start firing all the frontline people that won't defy their medical training and take a vaccine because they've already had it. They survived it. They know that they're going to be just fine. They were heroes when there was no vaccine. Now we fire them. And to this day, major hospital systems across this country, from coast to coast, cannot take care of the people in the beds that are sick because they've got no nurses.
There's another aspect to this, and that's the loss of education. Think of all the children's lives who are just disrupted.
That's one of the things that the school my children attend, when people come now and are talking about it, they know that was years ago, but they say, you guys were still in school. No one was worried about trying to do everything online. You were focused on having the kids here.
My youngest, his preschool it just stopped. It just at whatever point in the year they were, it just ended, never went back.
Yeah, I want to get back to the medical thing. Dr. Tenpenny, who's a name in Ohio, her medical license was stripped from her about a year ago. She cannot practice as a medical doctor anymore. Why? Because she differed with the COVID policies. She had solid evidence. She did not make stuff up. Yeah. But because she was impertinent to them and did not bow and scrape, her medical license was taken away.
She's got it back. She was reinstated. She's got it back. She was reinstated. She said a few things in testimony at the Ohio State House that got I don't want to maybe pulled out of context, but
it's one thing to step on toes; it's another to stomp on them.
Yes, yes. She the stuff she said, the 20-second, 30-second sound bites are pulled from it, and that's not. It's not taken in context of the 30, 45 minutes. Whatever.
Now, lest we be guilty of simply venting our frustrations, like most of what media is, left and right, talk radio and cable news. Let's stop for a second. Why? Why are we doing this? We're setting the context of the reality of saying the discussion about a revolution from the top down, the systems of our government, the administrative state versus the practices of everyday people. These are not myths. This is not real. Theoretical. This goes back 30, 40 years we've been watching the trends.
Sorry, I'm getting fired up as we relive this, but
we have issues, obviously.
Some of the words during that time that got me as fired up as anything is when we attempted to define activities, but more importantly, define people and what they do as essential and non-essential. As if what anyone does is non-essential for the bills they're paying, their car, their mortgage, their livelihood. Telling someone you're non-essential. And I still remember in North Carolina, the Raleigh Police Department tweeted out, the people went to protest in April of 2020. They went to protest. They were just marching. They were civil, no violence. And the Raleigh Police Department tweeted out, protesting is a non-essential activity. You're not permitted to do it. I'm like, someone responded like, have you seen the Constitution? Like, do you understand what you're saying? And they deleted the tweet because whoever sent it obviously hadn't read the Constitution.
Now, that is a great segue. Don't you love popcorn? See how this is? This is completely unscripted. This is the point of where we're heading in this conversation, because the Washington Post has had a recent set of articles regarding what some of the people around the former President Donald Trump are saying that they are looking at in regards to a worldview and an approach and policy should the president be reelected, should President Trump be reelected. And the term that's now coming to the forefront, we want to grab on this term for a second. I'm going to beat the drum for a while here. The drum is called post-constitutionalism. Post-constitutionalism. Now, I was just in D.C., and I made up a purpose on a morning to go and stand outside the National Archives and take pictures to be able to prove that it still exists. And that what's inside that building is still the original Constitution, and then as amended, and the Declaration of Independence. They're still there.
Wow. Protected in a vault.
Yes. I'm amazed.
Yes.
Okay.
And so you cannot say we are living in a post-constitutional era, because we haven't had a vote that basically says we're done with that Constitution. We have not revoked that Constitution. But the theory is, but yes, we have. And that's the potential of where the debate over this next election that's now upon us is going, at least with some people.
As I read the article, it just brought to my mind the fact that there are people actually working on this every day.
Yes. Serious people in very high places with boatloads of money that are working to influence culture and influence the civil government. I mean, the entire progressive movement has been energized for the last 21 years to, in essence, turn Woodrow Wilson's dream of an administrative state versus a constitutional form of representative government with checks and balances. This is that they have been working to make people forget that stuff as outdated and meaningless and do their stuff. And if you want to know what their stuff was, I'd say look at COVID. The administrative state defined reality, defined who counted and who didn't, picked the winners and losers, and basically said, do what we say or you're fired or you're jailed.
Well, I'm thinking, Wayne, of the mayor of the city that's not far from where you are right now, the mayor of Chicago, when no one could get a haircut, no one could get things done, but she could. And her excuse was because she needed to be groomed to be on television.
Well, she was essential.
She was more important than everybody else.
Do you remember how there were state troopers around Connecticut, Massachusetts, and so forth who were stopping people on the highway from leaving certain states or going into certain states, saying, you can't do this? I think that's not in the Constitution.
We'll talk more about this post-constitutional kind of thinking in a moment here on the Public Square. Very important conversation. Glad you're going to stay with us.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Let's continue on the Public Square today as we have this conversation with our team, Dave Zanotti, Jeff Sanders, Sherry Eisen, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan, and Wayne Shepard. And already, Dave, this is pretty serious stuff.
So let's go to WAPO and an article about Russell Vought. No. Jeff, tell me how you say his name.
Vought.
Vought.
Think of fought.
V-O-U-G-H-T. It's not vote. It's not vout. It's
Vought.
Okay, Russell Vought. He was with OMB in the former administration of President Trump, and he is a thinker. He's credentialed. He's academic, and he is somehow in the orbit of the Trump campaign and the potential of a new administration with Donald Trump, talking about what should be the response to this post-constitutionalism that is being advocated by the progressive left. Now, instantly, somebody read the headline from WAPO, because when you read the article, it's clear that what Mr. Vought is doing. All right. So let's hear the headline, Sherry.
A Trump loyalist pushes post-constitutional vision for second term.
Okay. Now, one more time.
Trump loyalist pushes post-constitutional vision for second term.
Now, the reason I'm struggling with his name is to make it crystal clear to everyone listening. We have not met Mr. Vought. We have not visited with him. We have not interviewed him. We have no connection with him. My guess is he hasn't got the foggiest idea who we are either. Okay? But now, when you read that headline, what did it say to you, Alan?
It made me think he wants a post-constitutional America. That sounds scary. That sounds bad. He must want that.
That we don't have that right now. We haven't had it, but if
he
you
wants
elect
it.
Trump, you're going to get
We're going to
this.
be in that.
Am I okay, so I'm not the only one that saw exactly the same thing. Wayne, is that how you read it?
Yes.
That's the way words work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first thing. We can't get past the headline to say, wait a second, there they go again, flipping it up on its head and coming at us as if we're not smart enough to figure it out.
Right, because his opinion is that we are in a post-constitutional America, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't want it. He thinks we're in it, and he doesn't like it.
And so what's the name of his organization?
Center for
Renewing America.
There you go.
The Center for Renewing America. We have no connection with the organization, none whatsoever. So here's the guy saying, wait a second, we need to go back to a constitutional form of government, but WAPO wants you to think that he and Trump want to blow up the existing Constitution, tear down the National Archive, and come up with something else. This is the kind of deceit that's going on out there that people are not picking up on.
I operate on a couple of ideas or principles often when I read articles. First of all, when I'm reading something from what I would call the left, I understand that the left always accuses me of what they are doing or would do if given half a chance. I call that projection. Okay, they're projecting onto you. Oh, be afraid of this, even though they're actually doing it. And the second thing, always consider the source. Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, The Atlantic, or whatever. What is their track record for telling the truth? What is their track record for twisting things and leaving out key pieces of information or just making stuff up?
So let's get this on. Let's get the whiteboard filled out or the radio whiteboard filled out. We're talking about a constitutional form of representative government as articulated by the framers in the founding and the documents that follow versus the administrative state proposed by Woodrow Wilson in the 1900s and manifested from 2003 forward by John Podesta and George Soros and the Center for American Progress. And the examples that we've used are Obamacare, the obliteration of the rights of pro-lifers by the weaponization of the Justice Department, and COVID. Okay, so that's it. Now, Alan, what do you think?
Well, I wanted to actually compliment the Washington Post very briefly here. I appreciated that they had a hyperlink in the article.
Yes,
because they're pull quoting Vought. They're pull quoting Vaught's piece, an essay that he wrote, trying to make it sound kind of scary and ominous. But they actually do hyperlink to it, and so if you actually read the links that are in these articles, you can see that it's saying the exact opposite of what they're saying it is.
Which a small percentage of people will do, though.
Right. So I appreciate that they put the link in there. You can click on it and you can read this seminal essay, as they call it, from 2022. And you can hear in his own words exactly what he thinks in context.
You also picked up, Alan, the fact that they are linking him as if he is the brain behind the body of Donald Trump.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes.
But the reality is that the connections between he and the former Trump administration, as well as to the former president, don't seem to actually be there when you do a little looking.
Well, in the Post article itself, they make it sound like he can tell Trump what to do. But the article,
nobody
nation just laughed out
can
loud.
tell Donald Trump what to do.
Good luck with that. Yeah.
That's part of Donald Trump's problem in some ways.
well, later in the article, they admit that he tried to do that, and Trump said, no, we're not doing that. And that's in their article. So it's not even coherent. They're not making a coherent argument in their own piece.
So what they're doing is they're applying what they perceive to be our ignorance of the facts. And they're giving us the piece of the story, the line of logic that they want to build. And then they're basically sort of baking that into another product of their narrative. Now, if I'm not mistaken, didn't they lapse over into the Christian nationalism language just a bit?
They did, yeah.
As well. Mm-hmm. So are they saying that Vought's a Christian nationalist?
Yes.
And that, okay.
And they keep seeding into this article the terms far right, far right, far right. They never use the term far left, but that about anybody that I've read. But anyway,
so now again, we're not it's newsflash. After 44 years of doing this, we're not surprised that there are left-wing media outlets that are consistent logically with what their narrative and their worldview is. We're fine with that. It's okay. You don't hear us blasting the Washington Post. What we're saying is they have the right to do whatever they want to do. It's a free country, free speech, and the First Amendment works for them. And people have the right to say, excuse me, I don't think you're being really honestly transparent or truthful.
Mm-hmm.
Do they teach this style of writing in journalism schools now? No, just
what a good
sincere question, because I remember taking journalism classes, and they taught you how to headline something, how to start with all the information at the front and then unpack it. There was a structure to how you would write a news article. But this isn't that. This is something I'm actually impressed. As someone who does writing, I'm impressed at how they're able to bake the dishonesty into the pie so well.
It's well written. Wayne, did you take journalism classes?
The most difficult course I ever took was a course on news writing and writing the lead.
Yeah,
difficult. I struggled with that. The instructor was a man who was in the fray. He was a journalist, a top-notch journalist in Chicago, and boy, he taught us a lot. But it was tough.
I started in high school and college same way, publications, and so. Yes, so we've got at least 3 people. Anybody else here do any journalism coursework?
Not journalism.
I may have been registered for a class. I may not have made it to that class often.
I took a lot of writing classes.
Well, and
but not
a lot of
journalism.
language classes. So we've got an interesting balance here in regards to words and language and what words mean and the responsibility of words. Let me import also then a biblical word in this reality, is that the teaching of the New Testament is very clear, as is the teaching and practice of the Old Testament. In dealing with the Word of God, the highest sanction, the highest calling, the most dangerous activity was the responsibility of the scribe in making certain that the manuscripts of the Scriptures were accurately transferred and moved forward to the next generation in the Old Testament. That same sense of these words, all words matter, and these words matter most, is clearly a reality of the New Testament as well. Getting it right, telling it truthfully, and keeping it in that vein. And Jeff, you've spent a lifetime studying multiple languages that affirm that reality.
Yeah, I'm a language nerd. But when you're preaching a sermon, and I've had some experience with that, it's important to define your terms in the sermon so everybody understands. I would like to know, this is a serious question, what is a Christian nationalist? Because as I read that article, I cannot find the definition other than it's a boogeyman, and I've never met a Christian nationalist.
All right, let's pick that up in a moment here on The Public Square. Use that website. There's lots of great information there, thepublicsquare.com. The smartphone app is a great way to listen to this program as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the public square.
The whole team is here today. Well, Melanie's not here, but Sherry Eisen is sitting in, and grateful for that, Sherry. Thank you. Let's continue the conversation on the public square.
So the question of Christian nationalism, does it really matter to WAPO if they ever define the term, but other than giving you the mysterious feeling that whatever that might be, it's bad?
Yeah, it's got to be. You can hear the music in the background.
Yes,
dun,
yes.
dun, dun.
And Dr. Allen has a line in his speech at the Bradley presentation where he talks about the nationalisms, whether it's Christian nationalism or economic nationalism or conservative nationalism. And he basically is in that line, I think what he's trying to say to us is recognize this is a tool, all right, to make you think you're being followed by an ism. And if you become a follower of the ism, then you'll be a part of the cult of Christian nationalism. And that's what Donald Trump's all about. Be afraid, be very afraid. I mean, Donald Trump is not known as an A student, okay, in regards to a man of letters and of intense study.
Right.
I'm guessing that if you asked him what Christian nationalism is, he would know. I'm not even sure Mr. Vaught would be able to explain what Christian nationalism is. It doesn't matter to the Washington Post.
Well, they're using this term Christian nationalism because the term fascism won't work because they could never find one thing Donald Trump did that was fascist.
Oh, they can call him all the fascists they want. They recognize that if they use that term, they're calling you a fascist.
Right.
And that's the problem. You see, they want you to follow their way. They don't. This is breadcrumbs. They don't want to hit you over the head with a pork chop. They want you to just take the breadcrumbs.
Well, and I think they're also changing the definition of things like Christian nationalism. How do you define something if other people keep changing the definition on you? You know, it's like the nailing Jello to a wall.
Well, and we went down that path in the programs that we did about regarding Heidi Przybyla. And you know, she did exactly what you said. Once she was confronted with the reality of what she was saying, she went backwards 100 miles an hour and hasn't said another word.
We probably all have had someone in our life, and we can think of them that when you try to argue with them, they argue like that.
Yeah.
Like you can't defeat that kind of person in an argument because they'll never concede the loss. So at some point, you just have to state the truth and move on. Let people know what's happening and then move on.
Well, Christian nationalism seems to be a created phrase that is being perpetuated so that it can put Christians in an adversarial position if they stand for anything for the country. And we have to be mindful of the manipulation of that.
It serves the narrative. And the narrative is Trump bad, whoever else is there good. It's just that simple. And right, bad, left, good. And it goes the whole way down the ballot. It's a worldview. It's okay. And it's the top against everybody else. Now, let's go back to Civil War for a second because we brought it up, and I think it's important. Wherever we are, we say this. Anyone who is thinking that a civil war would be the release of a right tension in our country, that there's something about it that would either be fascinating or inevitable or justifiable, let's be very clear here. That is a disastrous way of thinking. It is completely, in our opinion, based on what we read in the scriptures, it is completely wrong. It is completely wrong. And in fact, it is tactically exactly what the administrative state wants to happen. Because if people start fighting each other in the streets, they start shutting down the system that we have. It gives the administrative state the perfect window of opportunity to do COVID to us all over again, to take over and basically sort out the winners and the losers. And this time around, you don't get out of jail free.
You know, along these lines, I was talking with a gentleman that had immigrated to the United States from China in the 1980s. And he was talking about, he wanted to know, in the course of the conversation, he didn't know if I knew what communism was. And it was very interesting, though, because he has talked with so many people that defend communism that he was treading lightly on what he was saying. And as we talked about this, I told him that I did understand communism. And he said, could you tell me about it? And I said, it is where the government takes there is no personal liberty. There's no individual. There is only the state mentality. And he said, that's what we fled from. And we came here because you had a country that had a constitution that protected you. And we do need to protect that constitution.
And this is what the real debate is about. Now, again, we are an independent organization. We will not, through this entire process, tell anyone who to vote for. But what we will do is, the best as we can, bear witness to the truth in the midst of this debate. I'm going to tell you right now that the presidency is not singularly the most important thing that's going to happen this year, the election for the presidency. What is far more important is whether or not we come to an understanding that as long as there is a post-constitutional movement coming against the people, we have to redress that crisis according to the tools that were given to us by the founders and framers. And that's where Dr. Allen's work on Montesquieu is so important, because Montesquieu is known as making one of his greatest contributions in the spirit of the laws in the notion of divided government, separation of powers, and checks and balances. You see, our system, the people who gave us the system, predicted in their own minds this could happen. And if it does happen, how do you fight it? You don't have to do civil war. What you have to do is to rise up from the bottom and restore the authority of your city council, your state government, your members of Congress, your members of the United States Senate, and to push back from the moral and legal authority from the bottom, because the bottom is more powerful than the top.
And we must live in a culture that has citizens that understand the laws that are in place need to be applicable regardless of who is in office or who isn't in office. And regardless if someone is making a decision in office that goes against the law, just because you like that decision, you need to say, hey, wait a minute. We can't have that because that's against the law. I'm thinking of the tweet that Joe Biden, I know someone wrote it for him, but where he basically said the Supreme Court tried to stop him from paying off student loan debt, but he's going to do it anyway. He's going to turn his nose at the Supreme Court. Let's just imagine for a second that Donald Trump sent that tweet. How would the Washington Post, the New York Times, all of academia respond if Donald Trump sent a tweet that said, I'm going to ignore what the Supreme Court said? I don't have to adhere to that.
And doesn't that break that he took an oath of office? I mean, what do we do with that?
So let's scramble the eggs a little bit more. Mixing metaphors between popcorn and breakfast.
It is allowable.
Yes. What we've got here is a situation where what we're trying to say, we need to say very clearly. There's a real good chance that most of the rhetoric surrounding this election is missing the point altogether. It's driven on narratives. Christian nationalism against liberty. They want to take all your rights away, and abortion is a perfect example, versus the love of all of life. It's a narrative game. It's a mud-slinging narrative contest. But and so we see that, and we see how they're using the issues. And both sides, they want this to be on the peripheral. There is a deeper conversation that we're desperately trying to get to today, and fumbling about it quite well. Is that this is about how shall we then live? How will we govern ourselves? What standards will we apply? Will we accept the vision of progressivism and the modern state? Or will we go back to the concept of the consent of the governed, and that our rights come from God, and divided government and separation of powers and checks and balances? And which America do we want to be a part of? Which one is the one we're looking for?
Let me hit the pause button just briefly here in the public square. Dave mentioned earlier our monthly update, and it is available now. You can receive it in the mail by simply requesting it through our website. You can email us and ask for it. You can call us and ask for it. Or you can read it online, the monthly update. And as Dave said, it deals with the very thing we're talking about here today on the program. Very great read. Thank you, Dave, for putting that together. It's available to anyone listening right now. All right, let's take our final break. Some of you have to leave. If you do, make use of that website or smartphone app and listen online to the remainder of this program. We've talked about a big problem here today on the public square. Let's get to what we feel is the solution or solutions to this issue. Back to the team here with Dave Zanotti.
Wayne, sometimes I feel like this is Little Rascals radio. Because you know how the Little Rascals would always like go up to where the grown-ups were and watch what they were doing, then come back and try to imitate it and break it down, and all the stories that we learned? Sometimes I feel like we are the Little Rascals that are somehow getting into these meetings, moments, and opportunities to see what the people in power are actually trying to pull off. And then we've got to run out and tell everybody what they're trying to do to all the rest of us. Now, this is not done from an agenda of us attempting to secure power, because we're in the power curve, but we don't take any of the power. So you have to understand, this is not us advocating for a candidate, and it's certainly not us advocating for any of the political parties. This is about a question of truth. And how shall we then live? How do we govern ourselves in accordance with truth? And are we going to throw everything away, calling it a living constitution that means we can morph it into whatever Play-Doh images we want? Or are we going to go back to say that words matter and that the things that we agreed upon for hundreds of years still represent our consent, and we will work it out from there? So this is the first thing. If you don't have a copy of the Constitution, can we please send you one for free?
Great idea.
If you haven't read it for a couple of years, you know, it takes maybe 15 minutes to read the United States Constitution. That's all.
It's got some tough words here and there, but, you know, that's what a dictionary's for.
Yeah, and
right?
It's in English.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can read the Constitution and you can read the Declaration. I don't know. Abraham Lincoln called himself a man of the Declaration. I don't know that there's a higher compliment for an American than to be a man or a woman of the Declaration, because that worldview is still the anchor of our hope. People talk all the time about American exceptionalism and American distinctiveness. It all comes from the Declaration.
And Sherry, you brought this up during the break, but we need to teach the Declaration and the Constitution.
Oh, yes. I think with the advent of revisionist history and trying to change and make our history look like everything was bad, we need to just get back to the truth of what these documents say. And it eliminates so many other questions, even down to things like separation of church and state. Children need to be raised understanding where our liberties come from, and we need to bring it back into education.
Then we have to engage is another word we talked about. And I want to talk for just a second about not taking the bait. The bait in 2024 is that all that matters is who wins at the top of the ticket. That's the bait. That is the bait. Please don't take the bait. One simple reason. No matter who wins that job, it's a 48-month task.
Yep.
Right now, it's a 48-month task. This is
in reality shorter than that, though, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it'll actually be about 24 months when you consider the power of being a lame duck.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing is this is a 48-year task that we're talking about right now. Not a 48-month, 48 years. This is a generational issue.
Well, and that's why I think part of the bait right now you're seeing is you're going to get a dictator. No, it's not going to be over in 4 years. This person's going to seize power, and they're going to stay in it for their whole life and your whole life. Yeah. And so I think that's part of the bait. You know, obviously you always have to guard against somebody seizing all power, of course, anybody. But you know, but to your point, that's not going to happen. Especially if we keep our eye on the ball and look at the right things.
Now, we made an earlier case that we went from zero to insanity in 100 days based on COVID, but let's remember which side of this debate was driving that train.
You know, I just want to go back to something Sherry said about education. Your kids may have wonderful history and civics teachers, but the chances are they probably don't, in my opinion. And so parents, it is your job. It will not be, do not rely upon the schools to do this. It is your job. Grandparents, it's your job. And even if you have adult kids, I've got adult children. We have a great time sitting around.
We're still talking about
where
this
we
stuff, yeah.
ask about this stuff. And one more thing I want to mention is churches can do this. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a whole thing called the American Mission Series. Pastors or Sunday school teachers, you can have a Bible study and talk about the principles of godly government that have found their way. We have incorporated this into the Declaration and into the Constitution. Where does this stuff come from and what does it mean? This can be taught in churches, and I think they should be.
Well, and we have a relatively new resource, Kids on the Square, for young kids. That's a good place to start. The broadcast and podcast Kids on the Square. Just look for it anywhere.
And there's something else here, too, and I have no part in this. You all work very hard, Rob especially, on iVoters.com. I'm just a voice on the radio, but he's doing all the work. iVoters.com is a great place to become engaged. That's what we're talking about. To get engaged, get in the game. iVoters.com is a great way to do it.
And Wayne, thank you, because that is so critical. Because iVoters will be again this year for the general election in all 50 states. And you can look up who is running in your state legislature for those House seats and those Senate seats at the state level. If you've got governor's races, they'll be there as well, and statewide races. Why is that critical? Because, you can learn a lot in a very short amount of time, in very short order, when you start looking for these candidates and where they stand on the issues. You can find out a whole lot of stuff to give you far more confidence. You don't have to go in blind and just say, I'm going to pick a letter and vote a slate. You can actually go on their websites. You can study their bios. You can see where they went to school. You can see who's giving these people money. You can see who they're standing next to in their pictures. I mean, you can find out stuff quickly.
Well, and you can go to their social media profile. I had one person tell me, they say, I thought I was going to vote for a guy. I went into his social media. He's a jerk. The way he treats people and engages, he's a jerk. I'm not gonna vote for him. I'm also reminded of a state representative that was running a few years ago as a business guy. He was getting out of the business world. He wanted to serve. He was going to take a massive pay cut to go do this at the state legislature. And when we sat down to talk, he said, what amazes me is how unengaged the population is, in the sense that, what he meant by that, he was going to all these county commissioner meetings, township trustee meetings. He's like, they're spending millions and millions of dollars every week, and there's no one there.
No one there.
No one sees it. And he's like, I'm like looking around the room like, and he's admitting he had no idea this all went on until he wanted to start meeting people and run for office. And he was saying, we have to be more present.
This has nothing to do with iVoters, but I live in a very populous county, and the county recently put online a survey. How should we be spending our money in this county? Would you believe that out of this huge population, I can't tell you how many people live here, 800 people have taken advantage of that opportunity to respond to that survey.
I'm impressed it's that many, Wayne.
Yeah.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And, this brings us to another subject we should probably do another program on, and that's what we call the grid of involvement. Now, we got to figure out how you can do a whiteboard on radio, because it does have some graphs and charts with it. But it bespeaks the idea of who actually gets involved and who actually makes a difference. This much we can say with absolute certainty is, if people are willing to be free agents. What do I mean by that? Not beholden to a personality or a party, but they're willing to think with their own minds that God gave them. Get educated with an opportunity like iVoters, and then go out and do the best they can with the candidates that are available in front of them. That's progress toward liberty, and that's essential. And so we're committed on the education side, on the engagement side, and on the side of trying to bear witness. We can't fix this in the next 48 hours. We can't fix it in the next 48 weeks. We're going to be at this for 48 years, but we're going to be at it together.
All right. Well, one more time, I want to urge you to get the monthly update from the American Policy Roundtable. I always mention the publicsquare.com. We have a website, aproundtable.org. Really was our first website, and there's lots of great information there as well, aproundtable.org. But ask for the monthly update through either website. We'd be glad to send it to you in the mail or get it to you any way you like. All right, team, thank you. We'll see you all around the table next time on the Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.